Welcome to the Book Binge. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today we're going to be doing a very big book haul. It feels like both forever ago and no time at all since the last one of these, but the last one of these hauls that I did a few months ago was, if I remember correctly, pretty small, all things considered. This one is anything but that, if you saw the thumbnail. I think this might be my biggest physical book haul video that I've done up to this point, and nearly all of that was stuff that I acquired in just the last handful of weeks, and the reasons for that will be pretty obvious when I go over a couple of these entries, basically. But I don't want to waste too much time. I don't want this video to be much longer than it needs to be. I just want to show off some of the cool books that I've gotten, starting off with I'm going to put this in the ARC section. It's not technically an ARC, but I did receive the Evol Algorithm, the first book in the Evol trilogy, by K.M. Moak from the publisher. So this is, for all intents and purposes, a review copy. Like I said, it's not technically an ARC. The book is already released, so it's not advanced in any way, shape, or form. But Andorita Books, who does a lot of special edition stuff for Christopher Rocchio, partnered with the three folk that make up K.M. Moak and did a limited, signed run of these books. And while I didn't get in on that particular drop, I was offered a copy directly from the publisher, and so I accepted that. And that means that while this isn't an ARC, it is, like I said, technically a review copy. That means I'm implicitly obligated to get to it sooner than later. And since some people know the Evol trilogy here as conceptually being based a good bit on some of the art that is involved with it, I guess I'll show off a little bit of that for you guys. There's the interior end paper for the beginning of the book. This is, at the end, some pretty neat stuff. I believe two of the people that make up this author are the writers and world builders and whatnot, and then one of them is specifically the artist. But I won't show off all of the art just to preserve the surprise for people who get a copy of this themselves, but there's one of the interior illustrations. All of the interior illustrations are bunched up into one group. So that one is one of them. Let's find one more to show you guys, just for the heck of it, I suppose. Let's do the one where some of the assets from the cover comes from. So there's that bigger piece of art as well. Pretty impressive style. I like the style. The concept of the books, or of this first book anyway, definitely intrigued me enough to want a copy of the book. And so when I was offered a copy, like I said, I was very happy to accept it. I will probably read this book this year. I feel obligated to do so sooner than later, obviously, because I was gifted a copy of it. So thank you to, oh man, I'm so sorry I forget the press, World Builders of Queen Street, for providing me this copy. I believe that's technically the publisher. Let me make sure that that's correct. Yeah, World Builders of Queen Street is the publisher, so thank you for gifting me that copy. Speaking of gifts, the next entry that we're going to talk about here is going to incorporate one very large gift that makes up 22 different books, plus the first 5 of my individual purchases for this month. That is because Reen and I decided to bunch up and get me the rest of Discworld. I'll show off all of these books individually here in a moment, but to put it quite simply, some of the books in the series are getting, oh geez, loud noises from things falling over on my desk. There's another stack here. Some of the books are getting a slightly updated cover design when it comes to the paperback copies, even though the paperback copies, the ISBNs of them are remaining the same. And because of that, Rena and I decided that it was probably a good time for me to get as much of the rest of the Discworld collection in the matching editions to what I already have down there for the first 15 books as possible. And so we made a solid effort at doing so. Basically everything that Reen gifted me, he bought 22 of these books for me himself. He's a crazy person. But so that starts off with Soul Music. I'm just going to kind of show off all of these basically in publication order as I go along. Most of these he gifted himself. All of the ones that are matching the proper covers design like this. He gifted me. Only one of the ones that Reen bought for me was the updated cover design. That would be Masquerade, would be the one that Reen gifted me. That was unfortunately the quote-unquote wrong version. But so there were a few of them that he was pretty sure would be the wrong version, so he gave me the information to try to purchase myself. And unfortunately, all the ones that I purchased myself of the standard main series were also the wrong editions, funny enough. So that was slightly annoying, but thank you very much, Tareen, for purchasing so many of these books for me, and then all the friends who grouped together to buy me the first 15 of them in the first place a couple years back is beyond kind. Carpe Jugulum here is one of the ones that I tried getting, and it was the wrong version, so I'm gonna have to try again maybe at some point. Yeah, we're just gonna be showing off a solid chunk of Discworld books here for a bit. I really like this artwork, to be honest. It's definitely really solid. I'm glad that the updated cover design for some of them are keeping the artwork. There are aspects of the updated design, we'll get to another one here soon, that I like and some that I don't. For example, I prefer the font and whatnot of the actual title of Pratchett's name of the original design here better, personally. In publication order, The Last Hero is actually the next one that comes next. This was another one that Reen guided me to get myself, since there's technically two different versions of this. There's the hardcover version plus the paperback. Both of them are much bigger, so they don't match that format of the series. But the paperback has some new illustrations that the original doesn't, so I opted to get that one for myself. Thank you to Reen for, again, pointing me in the right direction there. But there were some others that I had to get myself. This was one of the ones I got, but it was the right version, so that was nice. I do really like this artwork. It's definitely got a vibe to it, and a vibe that pretty much fits Discworld, so, you know. These ones here are the more young adult entries, technically speaking, so they have slightly different design and artwork to them. But see, this is the updated cover design. You can tell, like, from the back of the title, the way that Pratchett's name is framed is different. The font's different. I prefer the font of these versions, the ones that I wanted to get to match. I don't mind, actually, this particular cover design element. I think that it's pretty nice, but you'll see that the publisher mark is slightly different, so the spines are slightly different, but they match well enough that it's honestly not that big of a deal. It's almost kind of funny, even, to have, like, sprinkled in the mix of the series. There are some of these, you know, young adult books, which, again, I'll show off another one here in just a moment, where the design of them, as far as the spine goes, kind of stands out despite being basically the same. And that's kind of the same thing with the quote-unquote wrong versions of the 5 books that I now have. And in a way, those are, like, all sprinkled out just a handful of books away from each other, so, like, it doesn't actually make that big of a difference. I might just go ahead and keep the copies that I have. I might go back and try to replace these technically wrong versions just for, you know, consistency's sake for myself, because reasons, but I'm seriously so appreciative to Reen for gifting me so freaking many of these books. Snuff is also an annoying little bit, because even though it's technically the same publisher and same design, they decided to do the spine with the cover art instead of with a straight color, so the publisher mark is at the top instead of the bottom, and thus the name and title don't line up in the right way, which is so silly. But, you know, it doesn't really matter that much. Like I said, they match well enough that it's almost a little bit charming in its own way. For the little bits that don't quite match, that was the last book in the series. And then also Pratchett's short story collection, which is a little bonus here, since it includes all of the short stories that are within Discworld. It includes a bunch of his non-Discworld short fiction as well, but includes the Discworld short fiction, so Reen also gifted me that. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that, and also for guiding me to the proper editions of some of the other books to get myself. So I now have a full Discworld collection. If that doesn't say anything about my intent to basically read the whole series, I don't know what does. So yeah, here at some point in upcoming videos, you'll see that entire shelf down there will probably just be a couple rows of Discworld, to be honest with you. So there's that little collection of books, and pretty similar to Discworld, actually, the next bunch of items, purchases 6 through 19, I guess we'll say, books 6 through 19 in the haul that I bought for myself are going to be incorporated here. I also wanted to acquire the rest of Haruki Murakami's output in the matching additions to the books that I already have from him. So I got the rest of these as well for a similar reason, because plenty of the books are getting also updated covers, but not just cover design as far as just template of it, but otherwise the art is the same. No, it's completely different. For example, the hardest one of these books to get, I'll show them off in just a second, was the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. The first attempt at getting it was the wrong edition, but because it was the only one that was the wrong cover design, this matches more recent editions here, I was like, well, no, I'm going to try to find the proper one now, and I did. But that means that I have basically all of Murakami's books in this cover design that I liked of Hardboiled Wonderland that I initially got. This is the first 2 books collected into one, by the way. Here, The Word Sing, or The Wind Sing, and then Pinball 1973. Really interesting format here. If you read from this side, you'll be able to read the first book, but then you get to a point where the text flips upside down, and that's because that's the other book that you start reading from the other direction. So his first 2 books, which are both very short, interesting design choice for that. But then you have his next book. After those 3, he wrote Hardboiled Wonderland, and then it was on to Dance, 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 the proper version of the Wind Up Bird Chronicle. So I did manage to get a hold of the right version of this, thankfully. I'll probably gift or donate the other edition somewhere else, because I don't need that cover design, and I don't need 2 copies of the book, so now I'm just doing the same thing like I did with Discworld and showing off all of these in the proper publication order, basically. Starting off with all of his novels, because I did get all of his novels. And so now I have all of his novels, but I also went ahead and bought some of his other stuff in the same editions, like his short story collections. So you have some of these, like The Elephant Vanishes, After the Quake, of course. A couple more, Blind Willow, Sleeping Woman, Men Without Women. First Person Singular as his most recent short story collection. That poses a mood, by the way. And then I also got another one of his nonfiction books, Underground. That being about the Tokyo gas attack back in, what was that, like 2006 or whenever it was? It might have been a long time before that. I think that was around the time the book was published. Oh no, it might have been closer to 1996, actually, sorry. The first English translation of this was 2000, so some years at some point got mixed up in my head. I apologize. But because I have one of his other nonfiction books, What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, in the same edition, and it's one of his nonfiction, I decided also to go for this one. So I have basically everything that Murakami has written at this point. I'm only missing his 2 most recent novels, one of which hasn't even been translated into English yet, and then the other one, which doesn't have a cover in this design, only has one in this design as far as I can tell, which is disappointing, so maybe I'll pick it up someday, but not right now. So the main priority was getting all of these in the editions that I wanted them in. So that is what that is all about. Let's see if I can arrange the stuff on my desk here so I can get to the next items to show off, because again, there's a lot to go here. The next handful of these are mostly going to be some relatively nice editions, and many of them hardcovers. So you see in some corners there. The next book to show off, I think, might even be the first book that I acquired over the last few months. A fine press publisher, Chiroptera Press, released an edition of The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers that looked awesome. So I have a couple ebooks of The King in Yellow, and I do intend to read it. But this edition of the book looked pretty neat, so I decided to grab it. There's the naked hardcover, which looks pretty dope. Course, there's the sprayed gold edges, but with the concept of the book being The King in Yellow and all that, like, it kind of hits a little bit harder than it does for a lot of other books. They look properly more gold. There's a couple bits of artwork in here as well, so let me see if I can find a couple of those illustrations to show you. There's one right there. Let's go ahead and find another one to show you as well. One of the more that one's pretty epic. So yeah, just a really nice addition to the book. So whenever it is that I get around to reading The King in Yellow, I've wanted to for a couple years now because of playing Signalis. Signalis has a couple things in it that relate to The King in Yellow and reference it. I believe The King in Yellow as a book appears in that game at some point, if I'm not mistaken. If nothing else, it definitely heavily references it. So I've wanted to read The King in Yellow for a bit, and now when I do, I'll have a nice edition to do it with. But speaking of nice editions and cool artwork as well, I also got a hardcover. The pre-order for Discovery by, of course, the folks over at Talking Story came out, and they got that shipped out when the pre-order came through. I pre-ordered that months ago, whenever it was, and this has some pretty cool stuff going on with it too, including this artwork. Like, that cover is freaking dope. The naked hardback artwork is awesome. I don't know if this has any artwork inside of it. It doesn't look like it, so it's mostly just the naked hardcover there that is got to go with it. Of course, they all three of them signed it, so that is pretty awesome. Jacob, John, and oh my gosh, I can't remember the mother's name. Is it Amy? I'm so sorry, I forgot off the top of my head. I really do apologize. But yeah, I have Discovery now, so also whenever I get around to reading that, I also, once again, have a nice physical edition to do it. Oh, you know, the back flap actually says Jacob, Amy, and John. Haha, I was right. Okay. That's nice. The next hardcover to show off is actually a book that I've showed off plenty on this channel already. That's because I read it basically as soon as it released. That was The Heart of the Naga, the English translation of the first book in The Bird That Drinks Tears by Lee Youngdo. And I enjoyed this book, but the reason why I decided to pick it up is because the concept seemed really cool, and I ended up enjoying it a lot for some of the world building and culture building stuff, which is what basically hooked me to the idea in the first place. And I pre-ordered the hardcover back when I discovered it because this art design looks awesome in the first place. And like, you can see a little bit of a hint at what the next three covers in the series are going to look like. They've already designed them. I just like the stylization of the artwork, so I can't wait for more to come out, but I did get this first book already. So the next book is one that I got from a Kickstarter that was for American Paladin by Larry Correa. This is actually a pretty nice quality hardcover, to be honest. Like, just the texture of the cover, the dust jacket, and everything is pretty up there. Like, the camo design on the end papers is pretty neat. And yeah, I picked this up because it did seem fun. It was also basically the launch title for Arc Press at the time, and so I went in and got in to support that for personal reasons. So I look forward to trying that out. I don't know if that'll be the first Correa book that I read. Might not be, but at least I have that book now. I was also supposed to get the Dust Sacrifice graphic novel from that Kickstarter. It hasn't come in yet. Somehow, I've been trying to get in contact with them, and it's not been working out very well with Arc Press, so that's not comforting. But nonetheless, a couple more new additions to the library. The newest couple of Percy Jackson books for the senior year adventures, I guess. These are the first two I believe this is going to be a trilogy of senior year adventures here. I decided to pick these up because, like, the first one was just a handful of bucks on sale recently, and the next one had a, like, one of those coupon basically things where if you get a couple books that are included, you can get one of them 50% off or something like that. So I grouped the second one with another book for that purpose. And so now I have these, and matching dimensions and everything of my other hardcovers of the base series is nice. Not sure when I'm going to read these, probably after I read Magnus Chase and the Trials of Apollo. I'll probably read these after all of that. And besides, the third book hasn't come out yet anyway, because Riordan's been busy with TV show stuff related to the base series. So, you know, I'm glad to finally have those in my collection, though, because those have been out a few years now, and I hadn't picked them up yet. So now I have. Next up, we're going to talk about The Life of Luke Skywalker by Ryder Wyndham. I have a few of Wyndham's other books, notably being The Wrath of Darth Maul, which I've reviewed on the channel, and then I have a couple others about Anakin and Obi-Wan. Now I have the fourth one on Luke. There's only these 4 of these by him, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, so now I have all of them. That's nice. And this one even came with that slip case cover, whatever you want to call it. And unfortunately, I think there's one of the four of them that I don't have that cover for, which is unfortunate. I think it's the Obi-Wan one. So I need to see if I can somehow either find one or like get somebody to custom make one for me. I have a couple friends who do that kind of thing, so I may have to inquire some folk. But next up, purchase number 27, basically, or book number 27 of my own purchases to show off, is something very different vibe-wise, and that is the Bible, but not just the Bible. I decided specifically I wanted to get a version of the King James translation, the 1611 edition, which means that it includes most of the Deuterocanon in it. It's called Apocrypha if you come from a Protestant background. But so I have this too, because my main Bible that I read from is the King James Version. I like the language of it, and so it's my favorite version to actively read. And knowing that there was a version of the King James that actually includes a lot of the Deuterocanon, the stuff that you'll find in, say, the Catholic and Orthodox versions of the Bible, I didn't know that until relatively recently. I was like, oh wait, there's King James for some of those extra books. Sign me up. So I did eventually get a copy to include them. But what's interesting, and also shouldn't be surprising about this, is that the language of this is rather archaic. You know, it is from the actual translation itself. It's really hard to show off, but like right here in verse, let's see if I can show this very well. Verse 26, you can see nevertheless. You might see that that's a letter U instead of V. So a lot of that kind of archaisms of the text are in there. You know, use in places of V's, plenty. Not all, but plenty of S's are like the old version of the S that looks similar to an F. There's a bunch of J's that are spelled with the letter I, so that kind of thing. Different spellings of certain words, like less modern spellings of certain words. At the beginning of this, there's like a calendar included, for example. Let's go and find where that is. So you'll see like June right there. Hath 30 days, but the June is spelt with an I. Same thing with July there. You'll see that the moon has an E at the end. So you'll see plenty of those archaisms in the actual text here, which, again, I wasn't really expecting, but shouldn't surprise me. So if I ever want to read the King James version of some of the quote-unquote Apocrypha, you know, things like, let's see if I can pull up one of the actual books offhand here, like 1st or 2nd Esdras, or Tobit, or the Wisdom of Solomon, or anything like that, I may have to go through and like manually modernize the text, or rather modernize the spelling to make it easier to just read. And so that might be something that I have to do for myself just to read this. You know, I could always read it anyway. It might just be something that takes a lot of getting used to, but I got this just out of, you know, curiosity. And like I said, because having a King James translation of some of those other books is an interesting idea to me. So that's what I got that for. Finally, last up on this list, purchases 28 through 39. You know, we basically all have one of those authors or book series or something like that that isn't necessarily high literature or anything that we would say is like, you know, incredible reading or anything like that, but which we just happen to enjoy for whatever reason. And Claire M. Polson is one of those authors for me. I have a special place in my heart for Claire Polson, mostly because through the handful of years that I basically wasn't reading, you know, in late high school and the first couple years after graduating high school, I was in like a multi-year long reading slump for all intents and purposes. But each summer I would read a handful of books, usually like leading up to a week of a camping trip with family. Over that week camping trip, and then for a couple weeks afterwards, for the most part, I would read a handful of LDS fiction books, basically just contemporary fiction with a slight LDS bent to it, like characters are LDS, generally speaking. Claire Polson is one of those LDS fiction authors. I suppose I'll show off the individual books now. But anyway, so I would read a handful of these books each summer and really enjoy them for what they were. And there are a couple of them that I think would hold up on a reread for sure. Some of them that might not hold up as well. But in either case, I've always enjoyed some of those books that I read at the time, especially since I wasn't reading anything those years except for these handful of books each summer. So, they can have, something to some praise, put on them for that reason. And recently in a used bookstore at a mall with one of my friends, I happened to find a shelf where there was Claire Polson books with about 7, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say it was somewhere around 7 of his books that I hadn't already read, / the ones that we already owned, books that my grandmother gave to us, because technically I'm related to Claire on my grandmother's side, like a second cousin or something like that. Second cousin twice removed, I believe, but I might be wrong. These were the 7 books that I got from that used bookstore. By no means do I own all of his books yet, but there were another handful of them that I could get pretty easily through other official booksellers rather than secondhand, for example. So I got a few more of them even beyond that. Whenever it is that I go through and start reading Claire Polson books again, I doubt very many of these will blow my mind, but like, whoever says every book needs to blow your mind, sometimes simple enjoyment is all you need. So I got a solid chunk of Claire Polson books now. I have a shelf of the dozen or so books that I already owned from him, and then these other ones that I bought more recently. And yeah, that's the collection there, and that is the end of the book haul. So yeah, it was a very big book haul. Not necessarily that many unique items in there. A vast majority of these were Discworld, Murakami, and Polson, with only like this stack here being all that was really... Oh geez, sorry to smack my mic, I've probably done that a number of times. This is the stack of unique items that weren't like 15 trillion stuff from the same 3 authors. But yeah, that is the haul. Thank you for watching this video if you did. To all the Discworld fans, you're welcome that I own the rest of the series now. I do basically plan to read the rest of that series over the next several years, however long it takes. I plan to read probably anywhere from a half dozen to a dozen books a year, basically, 1 a month, more or less, 1 every other month or something. It kind of depends on what my reading schedule looks like, so that'll take a number of years to get through. Murakami is another author, kind of like Stephen King and Michael Crichton, that I want to read all of his books more or less in publication order, just over time as like palate cleanser type of thing. So I got the rest of his books for that, and then some other interesting pickups. So yeah, I've been rambling on far too long for this video, and especially for this outro, so I'm going to cut it off here finally. Thank you one final time for watching. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.